Hello, and welcome to something very exciting. This is something that we've been wanting to do for a number of years, and we're finally getting around to that. And we're finally getting around to it. And what that is a podcast that week by week covers what's happening at the Cleve Carney Museum of Art. We're calling it the CleveCast, and you'll be able to download it from wherever you get your podcasts, from our website, or even watch it on YouTube. And the program is going to kind of follow what's happening at the museum. And since we've just launched our Hokusai Ukiyo-e, the Floating World exhibition, which will be running through September 21st, this podcast is really going to be covering all aspects of that exhibition for the next several months. We're going to go in depth on several of the artworks. We're going to talk to the people who've been involved in putting it on. We're going to talk to our partners. We're going to learn more about the Edo era and everything that this wonderful exhibition covers. But first, in today's episode, we're going to talk about the person who ultimately made this entire exhibition possible. And that person is Edoardo Chiossone. So, who was Edoardo Chiossone? Born in 1833, just outside of Genoa, Italy, Edoardo Chiossone knew from an early age that he wanted to be an artist. In fact, at age 14, he enrolled at the Accademia Linguistica de Belle Arte, the Ligurian Fine Art Academy in Genoa, Italy, where he specialized in copper engraving. And early in his career, he traveled throughout Italy, drawing the nation's most beautiful artworks, documenting them and making engravings of them to kind of foster an official record and bolster patriotism. In the 1860s, about 1867, Chiossone began work at the Italian National Bank. And eventually he was sent to Germany to be trained in the making of paper money. And he went to work at a company in Germany called Dondorf Naumann. Um, and while he was working at Dondorf Naumann, that company was approached by the Japanese government. Now, this was about 1874. Japan, from the early 1600s up until about 1853, had a kind of uh, policy of isolation from the rest of the world. So, for that period, over 200 years, it was largely cut off from the rest of the world and just had a little bit of trade, a little exposure, largely with the Dutch. Um, but when they did finally open up their borders, they adopted an approach of trying to rapidly um, catch up. I don't know if catch up is the right word because they weren't necessarily behind on everything, but to rapidly align themselves with the rest of the world. And one area where they recognized they needed help was in the production of their currency. You see, prior to this time, all of the currency in Japan was hand painted. And you can imagine what some of the issues might be with that, a lack of consistency. Uh, it made itself very prone to counterfeit. There may have been issues with its longevity. So they recognized that they had to start to create much more intricately engraved and printed banknotes like they saw in different parts of the world, like Germany and Italy. So they worked with Dondorf Naumann, who sent Chiossone to Japan to help them update the production of their banknotes. When Chiossone arrived in Japan, he found a culture that would shape the rest of his life and his legacy. Chiossone, being an artist first, recognized the unique quality and dynamic nature of the artwork he discovered in Japan. Artworks like those by the Edo artists currently on display in the Cleve Carney Museum, artworks that around that same time were influencing Impressionists in Europe and were already on their way of shaping the direction of visual culture in the world. Um, and so, as he began to work for the Japanese government, producing really beautiful banknotes, many of which you can see on display or reproductions on display in the historical lobby exhibition um, at the College of DuPage, that is one of the many ancillary exhibitions outside of the Cleve Carney Museum of Art. Um, he developed a very good reputation in the country as an artist and as a person. And in fact, he was the only Westerner ever allowed to create a portrait of the emperor. But he also used his time there to start a collection. And he began to collect not only Japanese work, but Chinese work and Near East work. And he ended up, by the end of his life, having amassed a collection of over 15,000 works. And while he died in Japan, he he left his collection to the academy that had trained him in Genoa, Italy, to the Accademia Linguistica de Belle Arte. They were in charge of the collection, and it was owned by the city of Genoa. And it is that gift that was the basis for the Edoardo Chiossone Museum of Oriental Art. And that is the museum that we are partnering with for this exhibition. That is the museum that has entrusted us with the first ever US presentation of artworks from the collection. Because in this long story of Chiossone's life, none of his work has ever been shown in the US until now. Now, at first, his collection was housed at the academy in a park in essentially a villa, I believe. And that's where it stayed starting in 1903 and stayed up until 1942 when bombing from World War II actually destroyed the original building. Most of the work was safely moved and stored in time to be preserved, but some work was damaged in the moving that was required during the war. And in fact, there is a piece in our exhibition, which we'll talk about later, that was destroyed in that moving, damaged, and has not been on display since until now. That means this object, Shamasan guitar, has not been displayed in what is now the Chiossone Museum's current building. It has never been on public display there, but it is on public display at the Cleve Carney Museum of Art, a part of this exhibition. Uh, the new museum I mentioned that they moved into, the Chiossone, opened in 1971, and it is in Genoa, and it is a beautiful, minimal, and modern building where the floors kind of just cut across the building halfway, so each floor is kind of stepped with an open space where you can see the floor above and below, which also allows uninterrupted light from the full face of the building to kind of wash over the entire space. Um, Chiossone's collection is very wide ranging. It is in depth and it has some incredibly well preserved pieces, not just woodblock prints, of which there are many by artists like Hiroshige and Hokusai, but intricate, beautifully one of a kind hand painted scrolls, including two by Hokusai that are in our exhibition. Um, these pieces are still incredibly rich and have the same kind of intensity of color that they did on the days they were created because they've been preserved so well by the Chiossone, and they've never been on display in the U.S. before. Um, so it is an amazing gift that we have from the Chiossone Museum and from one man, Edoardo Chiossone. Now, I wonder sometimes what Chiossone would think about the first exhibition of his work being at a community college in the suburbs of Chicago. But considering the fact that he left his entire collection to his art academy in Genoa with the purpose of it serving as a basis for education and enrichment of his community, I think he would love the fact that the first presentation of his collection in the United States was serving the same purpose. Um, so we're going to be talking about this collection throughout the coming several weeks and months. We'll be bringing in other people. Next week, we'll start talking about the creation of this very comprehensive historical exhibition that we created just for this exhibition. We'll be talking to different people who are involved with that. But what's most important is you have the opportunity to come see the show. And this is not something that's traveling to another location in the US after our show. Not only is this a one-time presentation of this current grouping of his work, that may travel in different forms in the US, but we've created so many aspects, ancillary exhibitions, parts of the exhibit that are specific to our presentation that will not be going anywhere else. So not only do you have a chance to see this amazing collection, but a one-of-a-kind exhibition. And you can find out more about it at theccma.org or at hokusai2025.org. So I hope to see you at the exhibition. Until then, keep an eye out for our podcasts. They will be coming out every Wednesday. You can find them on anywhere you get your podcasts. You can get them from our website. We'll also be posting video of them on our website and also on YouTube. So until then, thank you, and thank you, Edoardo Chiossone.